Welcome, friends, to Brother Owl's Garden. I'm very happy to have an old friend with me again today. This is his ninth appearance on
Oh my
this
goodness.
platform, which I wanted to ascertain before I announced that 9 times, and nine is a mystical, magical, and favorite number of mine. So, ladies and gentlemen, my old friend, and more than an old friend, he's a big brother. He's a spiritual big brother of mine. He is the gentlest soul. He is unwaveringly authentic. He is humble of heart. He is unparalleled in conscientiousness. And he's also a fellow fan of fresh, warm cornbread out of the oven. Bob Belcher.
Oh my goodness. I was wondering who you were talking about there for a moment.
Until we got to the cornbread.
Wow, that was it. That's it.
We both love that. Bud, I want to thank you again up front for sharing so prolifically with all of us here at the old garden, and sharing of yourself and from yourself, but not for yourself. So you are a man of great honor, which I have said to you before, but I acknowledge you openly in front of all the viewers, just to put a little emphasis on what a great guy you are. You are a luminous soul, and I'm blessed and honored to have you as my very best friend. Couldn't ask for, wouldn't dream of a better friend than you.
Well, Bud, thank you, and back to you.
What are we
Um,
going to talk about today, Bud?
and nine, the spiritual number of completion. So that's I don't know what we're complete about, but hey, that's the number.
I think that's 12. Isn't 12 completion?
No, because it's 0 through 9. It's not
Ah,
1 through 10. It's 0 through 9.
well, I hope that your appearances on Brother Owl's Garden are not complete, but we have reached a milestone with the mystical, magical nine, nonetheless. Um,
Well, I I want to talk about worthiness and people who don't feel worthy and so on. And I totally understand that there's people who have gone through difficult times in abusive families and things like that, and they come out with a sense of low self-esteem. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about um, I came across a preacher, a minister. I don't know what denomination he was, and I was hearing people in his congregation, "Oh, I'm not worthy. I don't feel worthy," and it started bothering me. You're all sinners. We're all sinners. We're not worthy of God's love. And I thought, this is just about the most ridiculous thing that I have ever heard. And the reason that I say that is that, as you know, I've been a minister for almost 30 years, but a spiritual minister, not a religious one. I don't follow a religious tradition. I did go through Catholic schools. I'm very familiar with the Catholic and Christian religion, and I know people tweak it right and left, but basic concepts are certainly all there. And I have some familiarity with other religious traditions. But other religious traditions, I've really never heard the not worthy part. And I I've been on this path for 45 years, maybe closer to 50. When you said old friend, I wasn't sure if that was because we knew each other for a long time or just because I'm getting long in the tooth, but uh, gotcha.
well, I think that our friendship transcends this lifetime, and I'm sure that you.
Oh, probably by two or three. And you already told the story of how we met, and that was just too mystical for that to be an accident. So,
Yeah,
what can I say? Here we are
yeah.
on the planet again, my friend. So, what I was looking at, I've studied a long time, and there's one thing that I'm very, very clear about, and that's God's love. I'm just clear about it. I have had the experience of it. I was touched by it. It was just an amazing experience, and it's something that has just stuck with me for a long time. And anyway, so I'm hearing this minister talking about worthiness, and then um, I'm also hearing we're children of God. And I started thinking more and more about this, and I thought, well, there's something doesn't fit. Um, if we are children of God and God's children, then that just makes perfectly good sense to me. And I'm thinking that if we are God's children, which acknowledges the concept, which acknowledges that we're beings created by central source energy, or what we call God. So I have to ask, if we are children of our parents, are we not worthy of the love of our parents? And are we not deserving of love from our parents? Now, I recognize some people don't get it, but I'm talking about in a healthy family. Love flows naturally between parents and children. And, children make mistakes. It's part of the learning process. So does a good parent deny their love to a child because they made a mistake? Of course not. In a healthy family, even in many unhealthy families, love flows naturally within the family unit. And therefore, isn't it logical that love from the spiritual world would also flow naturally between our creator and the created? It just seems like a natural thing. I don't believe that we have to earn God's love. I think that's just nonsensical. I think that the love is there. My experience is that God is love, and that's just the way it is. It's not a vengeful being. We're created in God's image and likeness. Well, God's not a physical being, it's a spiritual being. Therefore, that thing that we call soul is that divine spark within us. That's the God spark. It comes to us. And so to hear somebody say that they're not worthy of God's love, I feel denies that they're denying God's existence within them. They're still looking for God outside of themselves and don't realize that this energy is part of our creator and it can't be separated. We can't not be part of it. And so it just doesn't make sense. And I'm thinking that if you feel that you're not worthy, I'm talking to everybody out there who feels that they're not worthy, then consider that you're denying God. And I'm feeling that that's a form of blasphemy because you're actually denying the creator's energy within you. And that's the basic of it. If you want to have some discussion about that, I'd like to bounce that around, see what your thoughts are.
Let's see if I can respond in reverse. That which is freshest on my memory down to that which may or may not still be in my memory when I get to it. When you're talking about we cannot be separate from our connection to God, divine source, origin, sustainer, all of this, okay? And yes, we'll just call it God. For those that want, call it what you want, okay? If you want to call it something else. No, we cannot be separate on our own. We cannot make ourselves separate. It isn't possible. However,
we can deny the connection.
I think we can embark on disconnection. So we cannot be separate, but we can unwittingly, or hopefully not intentionally, because that's, I believe, the first step in how souls become evil, is they willfully disconnect and reject. But that's a harsh and different topic, though relevant.
And they can, what they can willfully do is deny the connection. I'm not sure that it's actually possible to truly disconnect.
Well,
But
you can disengage, whatever verbiage you want to choose. You can disengage, choose to opt out of your inherent divine eternal connection to Godhead, source, Brahman, Brahma, whatever you want to call it, according to your own preference. But so can you be separate? No. Can you be disengaged, i.e. disconnected? So we'll say disengaged maybe is a more accurate word. Yes. And then once you are disengaged, whether it was willful, and God forbid, hopefully it was not, because again, I think that is the exact breaking point at which a soul goes into what we'll call darkness. Okay. Not that I have a problem with darkness, but you know what I mean energetically.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and the other thing is that you may have done it unwittingly. It might have been lulled. You may have been lulled out of your sense of connection and connectivity and plugged inness. You may have been gradually, deceptively, gently lulled out of it by something that distracted you. I don't want to say possessed, but commandeered you enough.
That's all possible.
Yeah. And so once you have entered that state, however it is you got to it, now these false and very destructive, very effectively destructive beliefs have fertile soil in which to grow. Because
Yes.
once you have become disengaged from divinity, from Godhead, now you are assured to be rife with confusion, doubt, fear, second guessing, mistrust, whatever you want to call it. And that is the very fertile ground for things to move in and steer you way further away from the light. And many of us have hypnotically sleepwalked into such an existence in our life. We have forgotten God. Not only have we forgotten God, in many cases, especially in Western society, we have very enthusiastically and willfully ejected God from all
Yes.
things, as if that's even possible. I
Yeah,
remember not to get all preachy and versy here, but I think it's Psalm 127. Uh, Unless God builds a house, it is built in vain. Unless God protects the house, the guards protected in vain. What I can't quote the Psalm 127, but we have done a whole lot very willingly and enthusiastically with fervor to dissociate ourselves from source, even to the point of where I don't want to go down this road too far right now, but I am convinced it will very, very soon become illegal to even acknowledge divinity.
I can see it going that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's, I don't want to get all political, but there was that
Yeah.
uh, uh, minister in Canada
All right.
who was thrown in prison
Right.
for a sermon that he
Right.
gave in his church.
Countless examples abound.
And
Um,
I think it was under the Obama administration. I'm not sure about that, but I read somewhere where it was illegal for ministers to criticize the president from the pulpit. Now, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the details of that. And there's so much nonsensical information on the internet these days. You don't know what's what, but it was some article that I had read.
well,
So that's very true, but that's not the point that I'm getting to.
mhm.
All agreeing with you. Well, we're talking about being worthy of God's love, and does God still have love for those beings who have fallen away? And I don't believe in a vengeful God. It doesn't track. If there's a vengeful God, then it violates the principle of free will, or maybe not. Maybe you make a mistake and bang, you get slapped upside the head. I mean, there are certainly parents that are like that, but that doesn't it doesn't track that a central source energy being that created the entire universe is going to be micromanaging our affairs on Earth. And uh, I simply question that. I don't know whether it's true or not. I'm not on
Yeah,
that side of the veil.
I,
So
I'd like to comment on that. And this is my current take, which may have been different 10 years ago and may be different tomorrow. But where I stand right now on that is, the prime directive, as Star Trek would call it,
right.
the absolute unconditional non-interference in one's free will. Okay, God absolutely, definitely does respect that. However, karma, the results of all of our actions, what our actions stir up in the universe of cause and effect. Um, you have every right to be wrong. You have every right to engage in evil. You have every right to harm other people in the sense of free will choice. However, consequences follow.
Oh, consequences follow.
So that's why the Roman Catholic teaching, as far as I would be able to cite it, would say God does not control you. You are not a puppet, and you will not be, your free will will not be usurped and commandeered and all that. However, your actions result in realities for you to experience as a result of them, consequentially.
Sure,
And so
sure,
while people make choices based on, in such a case as fear or ignorance or detachment, disengagement from divinity, or deliberate malevolence, they will enter into the consequences that energetically, karmically, and universally follow that, just by the natural spiritual law of how things work. And
sure.
and I don't even think that it's always the case. In fact, I think many times it's not the case. I knew a guy years ago when I lived in Hawaii, and he used to say constantly, "God hates me. God hates me." I mean, he would say this 15 times a day. And as I think back to that guy, and I always wonder what became of him, but I always wonder what would it be like to go through life with the absolute belief that God hates you, which he did believe. And I think also that it created a tremendous veil that he could not see, that he was thinking and speaking and doing in accordance with things that were a disservice to his resulting experience. And he thought, God is punishing me. But many times, I would even say most of the time, when people say God is punishing me, maybe out of the Muslims would declare those whom Allah loves the most, he punishes. In other words, for your own good, a spanking when you need it for the long run of your ultimate wellness. But I think
Right.
in most cases, you are in disharmony with the natural spiritual karmic law of things. And so that is being interpreted as God hates me, God is punishing me.
Well, it's also universe is reflecting back to you what you're putting out. So,
Yeah, you are the one flinging feces all over the place and complaining that your world stinks. Okay, so this particular guy's belief that God hates him blinded him completely to the reality of him being the projector of those things. Now
sure.
let's flip it. A lot of times, and some believers will not like what I'm going to say. I guess there's always somebody who doesn't like something anyone says, but a lot of times, oh, God is blessing me with this, God is blessing me with that. Okay, that's a very feel good belief, and it may literally be true, but also I think that a lot of the time you are acting from your higher self. You are acting in a higher frequency of wisdom and connectivity with God and harmony with the natural spiritual karmic law of the universe. And you are interpreting that as you're being granted favor, which we call God is blessing me. And in some cases, I think it is actually true that that's the case. But when you are living according to your choices, your thoughts, your words, your deeds, in harmony with the highest frequencies of divinity and the spiritual, natural, karmic laws of the universe, you are sustained and blessed and kept by it in ways that serve you as a result, as a consequence. Consequence is not only a negative word. And
No, it's just a result.
yeah, and the flip side is equally true. So I think that connection and awareness of our anchoredness and our rootedness in God is critical. And without it is the very fertile ground for confusion, fear, doubt, worry, self loathing, all those things that will
All
creep
that
in,
stuff.
you know?
All that stuff.
Yeah.
I I two things. One on blessings. Um, you know, a lot of what we went through and the difficulty that we had, and I look at I look at my life and I think that I'm just amazingly blessed. And the reason that I say that is that I had wonderful parents. I grew up in Hawaii, and I've had a lot of joy, and I've had a lot of pain, and I've had a lot of struggle in my life, and I've had a lot of ease in my life. And I look at it as everything is a learning process. Look at all these great lessons that I got to learn. And yeah, I paid a price for it. And okay. But I never felt that I was cursed or anything like that. Most of the difficulty I went through was because of my own stupidity. I just have to take responsibility for it. You
That's
know, it's
everybody.
somewhere. Yeah. And now, I don't know how many times a day, I just am stunned to look at what our house has become and go, my God, I'm so blessed. I'm just so grateful. And we talked about the attitude of gratitude in one of our interviews. And I think that it's to acknowledge on a constant and consistent level the blessings that one has in one's life opens the door for more blessings. It's just how I see it. But
Yeah.
I think too that this central source energy is from my experience and what I've read is really made from love. It really is love. It's the source of it. And I don't think that that love is denied because somebody has spent one or two lifetimes being an idiot. Um, you know, sometimes you have to learn what love isn't in order to learn what love is. And I don't know. I don't mean to be Pollyanna about it, but I just think that our attitude is what creates our life. You know, we create our life with our thoughts, our attitudes, our behaviors. And if you don't like your life, then change the way you approach it. It's that simple. It's, you know, if you don't like the food you're eating, eat something different. It's kind of simple instead of complaining about the meal. You know, choose a different path. And
Bob, you reminded me, I had a fantastic conversation with Peter Panagore, who had two NDE. He died
mm,
twice and came back twice experiences.
just
And
couldn't stay away. No?
yeah, and I highly recommend, if anybody has not seen that yet, please look for that episode with
Okay.
Peter Panagore. And one of the many things he said that really struck me, had a great impact on me, was that he mentioned that he had an encounter with Source, with God, where it was telepathically conveyed to him, which is how it's normally done,
Right.
that about this divine love and how that is unconditional. And it was specifically stated to him by God that, and when he was having a life review, he was feeling a tremendous amount of shame. Now, shame, as I've mentioned a couple times in other episodes, is pretty much the lowest frequency vibration, the lowest of the emotional frequencies that you can function at. In other words, that you can resonate. It is the worst.
Mhm.
And it is also weaponized in many cases for that reason, because it's good for breaking people apart.
Oh, shaming. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was feeling this immense sense of shame at some of the offenses and trespasses and mistakes he made that hurt other people, because, as you well know, in the life review, it's a very common theme that you not only see all the things that you did and how they affected people, you feel it as them.
As the other person.
You
Yeah.
feel
I've
what
heard
they
that many
felt. In
times.
other words, yeah, you are you, and you're observing you, and you are you, and you're seeing it from your point of view, but you are also receiving and feeling what the other person felt. And in that sense, he was having a tremendous burden of shame. And God said to him, do you see all these things that happened and all the mistakes that you made, and et cetera, et cetera? I loved you through them all. I loved
Yes,
you
that's what I'm talking
while,
about.
Yeah, I loved
Right.
you while you were making these mistakes. I loved you in the moment of your engaging in and acting out these sins, trespasses, mistakes, etc. And I'd like to comment about you in the beginning. You mentioned, we are all sinners, and that doesn't vibe. I think people just have to get past the the jargon of one religion or another religion's way of terming or describing disharmony, disharmonious. Sin is the Christian term, and sin comes from a word that means off the
Right.
target, off the mark. Yeah, you're off from what?
Yeah,
From
missing mark.
yeah, from total connected harmony in the divine, and et cetera, et cetera. And so, in that sense that we do make mistakes, thus we are sinners. We miss the
Okay,
mark.
from that viewpoint, but the idea was that you didn't deserve love because you're a sinner.
Now
It's,
that is an
that's
evil, manipulative
exactly
agenda by a controlling entity who wishes to shame you in order to manipulate and control and essentially command you and own you. And
exactly
there are religions
yes,
that have done that and continue to do that. We know
exactly
what they are. Um,
yes.
and most of us come into this realm of being. We come to this planet with, most of us, it's very common, with some degree or a great degree of this brokenness. I am not worthy. I'm not
I
good
think
enough.
well we come to I think that's a yes and a no. I'm not exactly sure. I agree with you in concept. Um, it's more like we put that on when we come back onto the planet because it's not a feeling that one has on the other side of the veil. That from my understanding, not that I've been there recently, but um, or at least for a long time.
I actually simply don't know if that's true, Bud, because if you refer to something called the Buddhist mind stream, I could equate it to when you go to bed at night, you fall asleep and you are not as you were when you were up and conscious in the day. And the next
True,
morning you wake up and all of your issues that you went to sleep with and et cetera, are still there, and you have brought them across with you. So
right, and that's where I was getting, where I was getting to, and we've talked about some of the counseling work that I did years ago. And one of the things that I have when I've worked with people, and many times, most of the time, 90% of the time, their issues are rooted in past life incidents.
definitely, and
And
that's what I
and
mean
when
about
we
these things carry over. Maybe
yeah,
you're
but
waiting.
what it seems like, yeah, I guess I'm going into agreement with you as I talk about this, because what it seems that um and I think your thing about going to sleep and waking up is also a really good metaphor for this. And I get confused on my metaphors and analogies, but we're saying the same thing.
Well, that's what
I
a
think
meta's for.
you know, there you go.
And you know
Um,
what? To our audience, Bob and I are not stating that this is absolutely exactly correctly true.
this this is a
We're
discussion.
yeah, we're talking about, we're trying to make sense of things. We're not here issuing decrees and
No,
fiats and
no,
absolutes here.
no.
We're doing the best we can to understand.
You know, I think that all of us, even the most enlightened, we're still just trying to figure it out.
Sure.
You know, one of the things that I've learned over the years is the more I learn, one of the biggest things I learn is what I just don't know. Because every time I learn something, it opens up a whole field of new. Well, how does that work? Well, that doesn't make sense. Well, maybe this is, and what is the connection between this and that? There's just a lot of questions out there that I don't think can be answered from this side of the veil.
I
They just
agree.
aren't we get to answer from here.
Yeah.
We got to go, like, hey, guidance counselor, like, what's up with that? And I admit that I take a rather laissez-faire attitude towards so much of this stuff because if you get all super serious about it, it can make you nuts. It can make you a fanatic of some kind of.
Yeah.
Being a fanatic is way too much work. I do.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I remember when I was a little kid, and maybe some other people can relate to this, but when I was a little kid, I used to dream that I got up and walked to the bathroom to take a leak.
And you dreamed it.
And I did dream it in a stupor, in a sleepwalk. But my bladder was bursting because in actuality, I wasn't reaching the bathroom. And there were a couple of embarrassing incidents when the next morning I realized that's how I remembered that I had dreamed, you know. And but that was when I was 18. No, I'm just kidding. But the point is, as a little kid, stumbling in a sleepwalking stupor through the dark, trying to just get to the bathroom. There's a lot of metaphor right there because the next day I was awakened, totally aware, understood what was around me, understood how to navigate and function within it, but not when I was in that condition the night before of being very deeply asleep. And my unconscious was saying, you need to empty your bladder now. And my body and my mind, my conscious mind anyway, whatever, were like in a blind stupor of smoke
Mhm.
screen, And I remember that I would find myself coming to consciousness with my hands feeling the wall, feeling all over the wall, looking for the door to get out of the bedroom to go to the bathroom. And so there's a lot of metaphor there. And we are on the sleepwalking, stupor, fumbling, bumbling kind of, side of things when we're in here. That's true. But hopefully it's also
Yeah,
true when we shed that we have this total awareness.
yeah. There's a lot to all of this, and I look at the religions, and like I said, I haven't studied all of them, but they they just touch it. There's so much more. I mean, I think that what's talked about and taught is maybe 1 or 2% of what's really going on. And I
Yeah,
think that maybe some of the most enlightened ones might get up to 8 or 9%
yeah.
because the more I study and the more I hear from NDE things, I get a kick out of listening to them. I guess we're all trying to peek around the corner and see, hey, what's what? But the more I realize that we just really don't know. And the best we can come up with is, well, I think it's this or that. But I am pretty clear that living a moral life is important. That for me, it's a matter of being aware, consciously aware of my connection to central source energy, that I'm just not separate from it. And for those who choose to deny that connection, I have a friend I've known for years, a devout practicing atheist, and he wanted to convince me about what he believes, but he won't listen to what I've experienced. So, okay,
That's
whatever
a
floats your
really
boat.
that's a really great point. Belief, experience.
Well, here's one of the things I've said for a long time. You've heard me say it before. You can only believe that which you do not know. Either know it or believe it. And I'm not knocking belief. Belief is important, and it can be belief can be a doorway to knowledge or a doorway to ignorance. It just depends on how you want to approach it. My thing is that I can believe something until it's proven that it's either true or not true. Once it goes into being true, I no longer believe it because now I know it.
Yeah, and that's connected to something that I kind of jotted down some years ago. God is not known in the mind, God is experienced in the soul.
Yes,
And for
we've talked
those,
about that before, and I think it's just absolutely true. And that, of course,
yeah,
it makes sense because that's where the connection is.
and for those who have directly, personally experienced source, God, you can blabber all day about your theories and everything about why that was false and blah 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 whatever. Go ahead, be a theologian to your last breath. I have experienced God. Those people, unshakable, unwavering,
No,
because
I,
they've touched it.
I had that experience that I talked about where, and I'll just touch it again, where Val and I were driving down the road and she said, I just got this message that you need to open your heart to all the love that's around you. And as she said that, I felt like an iris opening up over my heart. And this love energy came through and it was so intense, I couldn't drive anymore. And I pulled over, she had to drive. And for the next, actually, she insisted on driving. And for the next 5 hours, I was just floating. I told Val, if we could bottle this, we'd make a fortune because it was just euphoria beyond all you can imagine. And you don't get that from a cup of coffee and a piece of toast. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So, um, so having had that experience, the idea of God being love, of that pure love, it's unshakable for me because I experienced it. I know that
Yeah.
it's true. It's knowledge. I don't have to believe it.
And we mentioned that we carry so much over from past incarnations, and there's going to be some viewers who don't believe in that. Okay, don't believe it, but
That's okay.
there's a lot of stuff that carries over. And if you just think of the metaphor as going to sleep and waking back up, just think of that as the return home between two different incarnations, the same entity.
Same thing. So about that, when I was doing counseling work and the way I was trained and the way I understand it and the way I worked with it is as a spiritual being in a physical body having this material experience, we create from a soul level. We don't create from the physical level. These are the instruments of creation. This is an instrument of creation, but it's not the thing that actually drives the creation. It's the spiritual energy that drives it. You can deny your spirituality all you want. It's irrelevant. It's just the mechanics of it. And when somebody has something that's extremely upsetting or shocking, they get killed, they get executed, terrible stuff happens. It leaves an imprint because that portion of that spiritual energy that created that business, that lover, that child, that partner, that whatever it is, it doesn't make any difference. That was created in one's life, and that when something happens and it breaks that thing dies or whatever it is happens, the energy that created it is locked up out there. It's not back inside you, and you carry it along, you drag it along, and it's not until you come across skilled counselors that are able to reverse that, blow off the shock of that incident, and return that energy to the being. And that's the kind of work that I did.
Yeah.
So it's just,
Well,
that's what I'm saying. There's so much to it that we just don't know.
and connected back to how much we do carry over, and we do. I've done
Oh, we
sessions
do a
with
lot.
people. Yeah, I've done FTT sessions with people, which is basically a healing release protocol.
Right, right. I
And
forgot. And you're so efficient at that. And that's actually way more efficient than what I was doing. So
credit to Jazz Govern for
yes,
honing
yes,
that
bless
down
her.
into that system.
Wonderful woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Jazz, if you're watching. Is she here? Is Jazz here? There's a little Joan Rivers bit there. So anyway, I've done sessions with people where, let me tell you, here and now as this, utterly unaware. I don't even know what you're talking about. I have no relation. I cannot
Right.
even relate to what you are pulling up. And I'm like, well, I'm not pulling it up. My higher self is the facilitator. Your higher self is the one that's pulling this up and telling us that, and we can even find how many lifetimes ago this happened. And in many cases, I can intuitively see, not always, and I'm not saying I can make it happen, but sometimes I see that lifetime, and I'm like, I can even tell you where you were.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
not coming up.
I've had that experience many
Yeah.
times.
And there was one girl in particular, um, and of course I'll respect her privacy and all that, but she was about to turn 30, and we were doing the session. It was like 2 weeks before her 30th birthday. And we came up, she said, I have no issues whatsoever. I'm fine. You're not going to find anything, but yeah, sure, I'll do the session. And we did the session. Oh, look what we found. We pulled up this issue, or this issue arose, where she suddenly remembered after everything was being pulled up. She's like, yeah, I have had the recurring thought a million times that I want to die when I'm 30. When I'm 30, I want to die.
Oh,
Not just I'm afraid I will, or no, when I'm 30, I want to check out. And I'm like, your birthday's in 2 weeks, right? Yes. Well, we found out, to cut to the chase, that something like 4 lifetimes ago, it was 3 or 4 lifetimes ago, she had been forsaken by her fiance, who
mm,
more or less left her at the altar for another woman, that kind of a thing. And at that lifetime, she was living in Japan, which I found out later. I saw it. I saw the story and we put it together, and she's like, this feels totally right. She was living in Japan. She was 30 years old. She was betrothed to a man that she genuinely very much loved. Her entire life was focused on marrying this man. He fooled around with another, left her. She committed suicide. And this pattern was so strong in her that she had continued it for the next couple of lives. And here
yes.
she is in this one. And she had completely and understandably forgotten all about that, because I'm not that anymore. That was a play that I was in decades and decades ago. I don't remember my lines, but I don't remember what that character was like, that role, that expression of being. And we came to unravel all of it. And who's to say if it may ever have repeated again? But I will tell you that she is now 31. So I would
Well,
like to
I
think that that was dissipated out.
I totally follow what you're saying, and in the course of my work, um, I worked with people who they were carrying traumas from 2, 3 thousand years ago.
Sure.
I mean, how many lifetimes is that?
Yeah. Until they
And
are untangled and resolved and let go.
it's
But
all present.
now let's move it again. Okay, present. Now let's move it to the present. We pick up even more of that in most cases in this one, in this incarnation. There are many times when those ancient wounds will carry through because they have yet to be untangled, resolved, and released. However,
Absolutely.
most of what we pick up, I would say probably 2/3 of it or more, is in this incarnation from our childhood. And
Yes.
sometimes we can identify the exact moment when that
But
belief,
when you hit that button, it'll everything comes back.
yeah,
Time, feeling, emotion, what the weather was like. I mean,
right.
it's all there, how it impacted you.
Because the unconscious mind is constantly absorbing everything, although the conscious mind can't be bothered with all that because it's analyzing and deciding and rationalizing
No,
and all that. But all of that information was absorbed and it is accessible. It is still there.
there's another aspect to that. It's not only absorbed, it's also often judged. It's not just that it's absorbed and just flat. There's some place that's desired, that's just choosing this hurt, that was okay. It wasn't just, it's not received flat, that's what I'm saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what I was saying about the beliefs that we conclude. In other words, something happened. Let's say my parent, because of their, and we must be very compassionate and understanding about this, because it's being carried down. It's not only being carried through your incarnations, it's being carried down generationally through them
Yes,
until it is,
generational karma
yeah,
or trauma, generation.
until it is healed. And if one of your, let's say your father or your mother, if they have not yet identified, owned, disentangled, untangled, resolved, and let go and released and healed from that, if they haven't, maybe they haven't got the tools, maybe they literally just don't have the tools to do it.
Or don't
They're
even
going
realize that it's
to,
possible.
they're
You
going
know,
to inadvertently pass it down onto you, or subject you to it, is a good way to say it. And so if someone has been wounded by their father, their mother in some way, okay, understood, and it hurts and it sucks, but we have to be aware that you were maybe a 7-year-old child being subjected to that, and you had the faculties at that time of a 7-year-old child to process this. And
mm,
what would that 7-year-old child conclude? I'm inadequate. I'm not lovable. I'm incomplete. I'm not
I'm
good enough.
powerless. I'm
I'm
powerless.
unworthy. Yeah.
I'm, but that's what I was talking about in the beginning. There's abuse, there's that kind of thing. That creates a sense of lack of worthiness, self-esteem, all kinds of stuff. And to support what you're saying, this was presented to me in a form of really interesting awareness. You have a physical body and a spiritual body coming together to form a complete human. And this spiritual body has all that trauma and stuff we've just been talking about. There is also an imprint in the physical body that comes down through the parents. And that's where you get this idea of generational karma or trauma, or it's a portion of it. And when you take on a body, when you take that on, you absorb that stuff that's in the DNA of that physical body. And both these things come into play. Oh, good, bad, indifferent, terrible, wonderful, it doesn't make any difference. It's just the way that the joining up happens. And it's one of those things where I said the more I learn, the more questions I have. But all the things that we're talking about, especially just recently, these are all part of my experience as doing counseling work. It was just there, and it wasn't just my experience. The other people who worked on our team, we would talk about these things and go, well, this again, not talking about the people, talking about the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
And in the training I went through, there was a lot of discussion about the mechanics of it, because we had to understand what we were actually dealing with. And
And you know what
yeah,
else? But that reminds me of the Bible verse. I can't cite it, but the
that
sins of the
reminds you of the
father.
verse you can't remember, right?
Well, I remember the point, but I don't always remember, the
Right,
logistical location, chapter and verse. But anyway, the sins of the father are passed on to the future generation for seven
right. The
generations.
sins
And
of
it
the
doesn't
father are
only mean the
visited upon the
father and
son.
not the mother, it means the parents. And
Right,
that's what you're referring to. And that's acknowledged in that context in the
right.
Bible as well. And it's true. And Jazz Govan might call that the cellular trauma, cellular memory.
Cellular memory, I like that one. That actually fits. That's the
Yeah.
best description of it.
It's an imprint that is literally imprinted into the code of your DNA. It's in there. However,
Absolutely.
the good news is, and this is another episode, so let's just touch it and drop it. Dr. Bruce Lipton, The Wisdom of Your Cells, and also
Mm.
the FTT sessions that we talked about. This can be pulled up, identified, untangled, and released, and the resulting healing will come. It is
Is amazing.
possible. It is done.
And for any of your listeners out there who don't know Dr. Bruce Lipton, look up his book, Biology of Belief. Uh, is it epigenetics that he's doing? Is that him? I'm not sure. But he's now one of the prime speakers on the circuit, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Total recommendation for anything that Bruce Lipton has written. Now, I know I've shared in another video, but it's very, very pertinent to this, so I'll just mention it again. There were 2 times in my life where this occurred. I'll just speak of the first one because the second one was almost a repeat, like a reminder, a refresher course, if you will. There was a point in my life when I was on my knees, shaking my fist at God, angry, crying, lost, confused. And I mean, I had reached the end in this particular issue. I could not go on further. And I remember praying, and I said to God, I said, first of all, I know you are real. I know you are here. I know you hear me. There's no issue with any of that, but I can't go on and I need an answer. And as if you didn't already know, I'm not getting up until I get it. This is where I'm at. It doesn't matter if this is right, wrong, good, bad, wise, unwise. Doesn't matter. Here I am, and it's this. And I stayed there on the floor on my knees. It was about maybe 3 minutes. And suddenly, Bob, this wellspring came from within me, came from my core, like the core, somewhere beyond the core of my belly in there. I don't even know. And whoa, like a fountain of pure, cool water. And I like to say, as if I were a hot pile of bricks, and just, and in one gush, not gush, but flow,
Oh, yeah.
I immediately knew everything, all in one shot. This is God. I am being answered. Here are the answers. And here's even some commentary afterwards, just for a little laugh at the end. And the point that I will share, and it was 3 points, but the main one that was the most important is why, this is the message, came in with the flow. Why do you think you need to earn my love?
Which takes
Followed,
us right back to where we started.
yeah, followed by, you already have it. You always have, and you always will. You can't earn it, and it's not earned.
No, it simply is. And I think one of the reasons it is if it is true that God is a source of love and we're children of God, then we also have that love as part of our makeup, and it can be unrecognized, it can be denied, it can be all kinds of stuff, but it's still there. It doesn't make any difference whether you choose to acknowledge it or not.
And
That's
that's what made in his image means. That's what it means. It means that we possess a portion or an emanation of some kind of the divine essence which God is. And as Neil
right.
Donald Walsh said in the interview that we had with him last year here, if you want to just dismiss all the theological contention stuff that people get hung up on, we can all agree that God is pure love. And we must always
That's it.
remember, yeah, and unfortunately, or I don't, even that's a judgment, but regrettably, whatever, we do need to be reminded of that, because we just get, we forget, we get distracted by so many other things that are manini, nonsense. And that's why the quote from Rabia al-Basri, the Muslim mystic, I love her. This is what comes to mind. This is the quote that she said, may Allah steal you from all that steals you from him.
Oh, that's great.
I
That's
love
great. Yeah.
that. That's a beautiful sentiment. And we have to be aware, conscious, mindful, present to all that steals us from this divine connection, this unity in God. As I said in another episode, this constant cultivated communion. And
Yes.
and that's where we have to stay, especially as the world gets wonkier and wonkier. We'll just call it that, okay? This connection, this unity in divinity, this constantly cultivated communion, I don't think has ever been more important to any of us who are alive here right now in our lives than now.
I think it's vital for our physical, psychological. I'm not worried about spiritual survival, but it's certainly physical and psychological. But I think you've wrapped this topic right up to the place where we're complete with it. God's love is ours because it simply is. It just is. And if you choose to be evil and do terrible things, well, it may take you 100 lifetimes to figure it out, but that doesn't mean God doesn't love you. It just means you got to wake up.
You are creating immense suffering for yourself and others by willfully,
Right.
knowingly, and even sometimes unwittingly disconnecting or disengaging yourself from this divine inheritance of unity in God. And by doing
Yes.
so, you will experience and endure the consequences that come with living against the natural harmony of creation. Or
Yes.
you can constantly remember and refresh and recharge and remind yourself of who exactly you are and where you actually come from and to whom you are connected, and stay in that, rooted and anchored in that steadfastly. And when these thoughts of, yeah, but I'm actually not good enough, or I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, etc., when those things come up, understand that they are false, and they are maybe not even your own original thoughts.
Well, that's
Yeah,
a whole video.
yeah,
I mean,
you the brain is a transceiver.
I have a lot to say about that too,
Yeah,
which you can say in
but
a small amount of time.
let
But
me wrap it up. Let me wrap it up with this one point. When those self-deprecating thoughts arise, and that you are not worthy and you are not good enough, and especially if somehow you think from a twisted ego, kind of an origin, that uh, belittling yourself makes you a holier or purer person. Give me a break. Here's the quote by Saint Alphonsus Liguori: God is displeased at the diffidence of souls who love him sincerely and whom he himself loves. In other words, all of this, oh, I'm a terrible, filthy sinner. I'm unworthy. Oh Lord, I'm lower than a snake's belly. Uh, you're not impressing God. You're annoying God.
and that's why I call that blasphemy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So when those beliefs and those thoughts and those inclinations come, let them go. Swat them. You don't even have
There
to
we go.
swat them away. Just don't grab them. Just let them
Well,
fly by.
that's a whole nother thing that on the mind. I've got quite a bit on that too, and that's something we can talk about
Well,
another
that can be
time.
number 10.
That could be number 10.
But for now, we'll wrap it up with this episode on worthiness. If you don't mind, I don't mean to. Is there more you want to share? Because I have a closing comment.
No, go right ahead. I'm complete. There's other topics I'd like to talk about, but
Well, for this
I'm
one, it's
complete.
worthiness. And in conclusion, all that Reverend Bob and I have shared with you, we we do so in the great hope and belief that it can help someone, somehow, somewhere, at some point. Thank you for those who have continued on with this episode and viewed to this point. And here's what I would like to drop as the conclusion. Everything that we discussed and hashed out and navigated through in an attempt for higher and clearer understanding of this issue of worthiness and our worthiness as a collective and our worthiness as an individual has led us to the point where we come to realize that ultimately, in the end of the end, when we reach the highest peak of understanding on the topic of worthiness, there is no issue of worthiness at all.
No, and I have just my own closing comment, and that's if our discussion in this video and in other videos has helped even one person ease burdens in their life, I feel like my life's worthwhile.
Yes, and that's why I and many of the viewers so very much and sincerely appreciate all that you offer and share, and that you bring it here to share with us. And
Thank you.
to my viewers, please subscribe. It doesn't do anything for me. I don't want anything from you. I've never asked anything from our viewers, but subscribe so that the incredibly oppressive YouTube algorithm will increase the number of people that it suggests our channel to, so that they can find it and drink from the well of wisdom to the best of the ability that I've had to present it, that we offer here. That's why the channel was created. I will never monetize the channel. I don't ask for anything. I don't want anything. It's not about me. I don't want anything, but except for, please subscribe and share and like the videos, because you then help other people to find this content, which frankly, so few people care about. They're more interested in nonsense, all that. They're on TikTok and everywhere else. They're not here. But for that 1 in 1,000 that really needed this, as Bob alluded to, if we can make a meaningful impact by what we offer for even one person, the entire channel's existence is validated, justified, and I should say maximized, actualized, whatever you want to call it. So it's not for me at all. I don't get anything if I have 1 subscriber or 1 million. I don't get anything. It's not about me. But for the sake of those who may be introduced, who may find us, would you kindly please subscribe, like, share with somebody you know? You may have no idea the impact and the participation and involvement that you may have in helping somebody immeasurably. And so for that, I do ask to please do those things for those people's sake. And I thank those of you who will do it and have done it. Thank you. And Bob, I thank you. You are a fountain of wisdom, compassion, and love. You're a good guy. And everybody remember that ultimately, when you've worked your way from I am unworthy and all that self-loathing, delusional nonsense that we've been fed, or which has been impacted upon us through our life's experiences and trauma and wounding and all that, when you get to the point of realizing that you are worthy, the higher plane after that is, there was never an issue of worthiness in the first place, because I am supremely, perfectly loved by the greatest love that exists, not because of who I am and what I do, but because of who that is. God loves us not for who we are, but for who God is. And God is a
And
who.
so, and so okay, we're going to keep going on, and it'll be 4 hours when we finish. But for those of you who finally pick yourself up out of the muck of unworthiness and realize that you are worthy, what I would ask you to do is tune to the brother and sister on your right or left and help them. Give them a hand, and let's all raise up to be who we truly are.
That's beautiful and a perfect ending. Once you have reached this realization, help others around you. You can't make them do it, but be the example for them and be the encouragement for them to also reach this higher realization of not only are you worthy, but there isn't even an issue of worthiness in the first place.
No.
You are unconditionally, eternally, unstoppably, immeasurably, unconditionally and indescribably loved, period. And that is from the highest source of love that exists. Thanks, bud. We'll wrap it up there. Thank you, viewers who have stayed.
Aloha, my brother.
Aloha.